It's an honor for me to be here this morning. It's an honor to speak. Sandy and I, my wife Sandy and I, we just felt in this season of life that in the midst of the choices that we had, we wanted to be a part of establishing and seeing a church like City Life thrive in the weeks and the months and the years ahead. A church that right out of the gate intentionally says that we are here for everybody. And I think about that and I think, well, why should we make such a big deal about that? Because doesn't that sentiment, doesn't that value just reflect the heart of who Jesus is and His character and His mission for this world? When you think about the fact that the local church is the hope of the world, then how God-honoring is it for a church to say, we're not setting up barriers, we're not setting up walls that you kind of have to get over to be a part of us, but we're opening up our arms wide and we're saying, everybody, everybody, come and be a part of this, because we truly believe that Jesus is the hope of the world. And we as the church really have the privilege of representing Him and help introduce people to Him. And so again, Sandy and I are just delighted to be a part of City Life. And as I said, I feel honored to have an opportunity to talk with you this morning. So that's the end of the sermon. But for the rest of the morning, I'd like to talk with you about this word that's staring you in the face, this word, enough. What does that mean, enough? As I think about enough, and I've been thinking about this for probably a couple of months now, I'm thinking about enough in terms of, am I enough? Am I enough? Am I enough for maybe a specific situation that I'm in? For something that I see coming down the road towards me, or perhaps even just my general attitude of life, of questioning even, am I enough for what life has for me? Now, Sandy and I, my wife Sandy and I, had a conversation about this past week, and Sandy's very brilliant and insightful, and so she asked me the question, Adam, what do you mean, am I enough? And I realize this is not a good way to start out a talk, but I kind of have to think about it for a bit and go, it's really hard to explain. What does it mean, am I enough? But, on the same hand, I think it's easy to feel that all of us have those experiences at one time or another where whatever it is makes us feel, makes us wonder, am I enough for whatever this is? And we're influenced this way by lots of different things. Sometimes we're influenced by, the family that we're raised in, maybe intentionally, maybe not, maybe subtly. But those messages that can get sent to us like, why aren't you like your brother? Why aren't you brilliant like your sister? Why aren't you athletic? Why aren't you the good kid? And all of a sudden there's just this kind of this inner angst about maybe I'm not good enough. And it influences us in how we go through and how we experience life. Maybe it happens to us in other relationships. Maybe in friendships, we're desperate to be loved and belong and affirmed, and so we get into these friendships, but when it comes down to it, the truth is we're kind of like that last person in the line that's being chosen by a team, Well, you can have them. No, you take them. That's okay. You think about, the experiences of so many people that will go into a relationship, even a marriage. And you go in with this hope that here's going to be a place of intimacy, a place that you can belong. And instead, there's just this reinforcement of this feeling, this sense that who you are isn't quite enough. Well, truth be known, sometimes we don't even need anyone else influencing those thoughts, that voice, whether it's in our mind or whether it's in our heart, wherever that voice is. Because we're actually pretty good at just playing the tape over and over again ourselves. We've kind of got this, this inner Charlie Brown, right? That's always playing this message, who I am is not enough. And I haven't even mentioned yet all of those times we look at someone else. When we look at what they're doing, when we look at what they have, what they've achieved, and we think to ourselves, if I only had that, if I had that upbringing, if I had that attractiveness, if I had that intelligence, if I had those opportunities, if I had that wealth, then I could be enough. But instead, there's just this reinforcement of this thought that who I am is not enough. You know, I've been thinking about this, as I said, for a couple of months now, from a very specific experience that I had. I was asked to speak at a church where Andy Stanley is the regular speaker. The church watched and listened to Andy Stanley week after week after week, and I was invited to talk at this place, to speak at this place. And as I was preparing, like, what am I going to say? The overwhelming thought that I had was, good night. Like, who do I think I am to speak to an audience that is used to listening to Andy Stanley? And I'm so grateful that John has booked Andy Stanley after my talk, not before my talk this week. But I just couldn't get beyond going, what am I going to say? Like, I'd actually rather listen to Andy Stanley. So what am I doing up there speaking? Now, here's the interesting thing that sort of can take place in our minds. And that is that instead, perhaps you could say to me, counsel me, instead of going, oh, I feel challenged, I feel inspired, I feel honored that I've been asked to speak in this place, instead I was kind of paralyzed and just went, what do I have to bring to this? I am not enough. Now, maybe I'm making a big assumption this morning, but I think all of us can identify with that feeling. At some time, at some level of going, who I am is not enough. That's not really the question I have for you this morning, because I think we can agree that at times we feel the weight of not being enough. The question that I want us to think about this morning, in fact, the question that I want us to answer this morning is this: how do you know you're enough? How do you experience being enough? How can you go through life and know, be assured that who you are is enough? Because I'm going to let the cat out of the bag this morning, and I'm going to let it run all over the theater, and the dog can Chai can chase it. But anyway, you, whoever you are, and I'm speaking personally to each one of you this morning, you, whoever you are enough. Who you are, your unique wiring, your personality, your experiences, your skills, the uniqueness that makes you is enough. And actually, and I'm not exaggerating this morning. You're like, oh, pastors, they're always exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating here. That one of the most important things in life for each one of us is believing, embracing, accepting that who we are is enough. Now, I just want to press pause for a minute, because when I say that, there's all kinds of different directions that our minds can probably run off in. And we think to ourselves, well, yeah, what about all those times that I get into a situation, or that time that I got into this situation and I realized I was not enough? Well, okay, maybe that situation was to stretch you or to grow you or to challenge you. Maybe that situation was one of those kinds of experiences where you actually have to be honest with who you are. You're trying to do something that actually it's not for you to do. And that's actually a good thing, to become clear on that. Like if I say to you, you know what? I'm going to be the next LeBron James. Hey, thank you, Adam. But you know what? Like, I'm 55. I'm maybe not even barely 5'9" anymore. Like the league that I'm going to play in, no matter how good I am with a basketball, like Cavaliers aren't coming after, scouting me to say, hey, sign up. So you see what I'm saying? There are those experiences in life where you go, that's not really going to be in the cards for you. And you need to understand how you are uniquely wired and what your gifts and your skills are, and accept that that's how you have been made, and that how you have been made is actually going to be, accepting how you've been made is actually the greatest contribution that you are going to make. And so what I'd like to suggest to you this morning as we think about what does enough mean is a formula, if you will, an equation. Because what I'm talking about looks like this, if you like math. It's you, as you can see here. It's you plus learning, plus growing, plus developing, that equals enough. So I'm not suggesting this morning that, you just go through life on one hand and say, oh, Adam said, I'm enough, I'm wonderful, like everybody, like, look at me, I am enough, it's amazing. It's like really? That's a little narcissistic, right? That's not what I'm suggesting, that you just coast through life and go, I'm wonderful, and I can just go through life believing that I'm wonderful. Your mom thinks that, but, you maybe shouldn't quite think that all the time. At least don't present that kind of attitude all the time. That's not what I'm necessarily saying, because what I'm saying in this equation of being enough is that it's you plus learning, plus growing, plus developing that equals enough. But before we move on, in terms of trying to define what does enough mean, I think there's another important element as well. And I like to describe it like this. There is imagined, and then there is real potential. There is imagined, and there is real potential. And I'm not trying to dump all over our dreams of what we can be and how inspiring they can be. But I do think we need to think about what does it look like in terms of our imagined and our real potential. In other words, if I get up in the morning and I say to myself, okay, I am enough for everything that this day is going to bring my way. And actually, there is a lot of wisdom about approaching every day like that. That we get up in the morning and we say to ourselves, I am enough. To face whatever this day is going to hold. To orient ourselves in a certain direction, in a certain posture. But if I go out into the day and I say to myself, you know what? I am going to do a 10K in under 40 minutes. Now, any of you that follow me on Strava or Nike Plus or whatever, you know that I'm lying here. But if I go out and I say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to run a 10K in under 40 minutes, but I run once a month, and I live on a staple diet of Lucky's Donuts and coffee, then I'm either a superhero from a Netflix Marvel series, or the other option is I am living in this realm of imagination, of Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, and pixie dust, right? Who you are uniquely created to be, you, plus learning, plus growing, plus developing, equals enough for each one of us. And in fact, the biggest barrier, the biggest limitation is you and I looking at someone else and thinking, if only I was them, if only I had their gifts, if only I had their talent, then I would be enough. No, that's not going to be your greatest contribution in life. Your greatest contribution in life is saying, who I am is enough. And so I am going to learn, I am going to grow, I am going to develop, and take who I am, and through that make the greatest contribution, have the most significance that I can have in this world. So here is the important question, as you can see. How do we go through life and contribute to life from a consistent understanding, even a consistent experience of who I am is enough? Now, this may be a shock to some of you, but I want to be really upfront and say, the reality of us saying that we're a church for everybody is that we ask these kind of questions and we deal with these kinds of issues. The shock is this. Now, you might say to yourself, really? Isn't this a non sequitur? Because these two things don't make sense to me. But my statement is this, and I hope to prove it to you this morning. And that is, I believe that whoever we are, that it is an understanding and experience of God. It is an understanding and an experience of God that empowers us and even transforms us to know that who we are is enough. Now look up here, because 2 weeks ago our lead pastor talked to us about one of the best known verses in the Bible, which says to us what? For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Now some of you are like, hey, okay, I've got that one already. You know, it's memorized. But let me just say, not so fast. Just slow down this morning, because the truth of what Jesus is saying is so much more than just words to be memorized. And the truth of what Jesus is saying goes so much deeper, needs to go so much deeper, so that the truth of what He's saying sinks down, so it actually transforms how we look at ourselves and our understanding of, am I enough? For instance, how do you answer the question for God? So let's just back up and just ask yourself this morning, wherever you're at, how do you fill in the blank? For God. For God what? I know for me the answer to that question is actually changed and is changing throughout my life. You know, in my personal experience, I was raised in a family that really had no formal religious belief. We didn't go to church. We never really talked about God. And yet, I can tell you that I had a very strong belief in God as a child. That I didn't need instruction about God. I may not have believed in God in a fully formed way, but God was very meaningful. This idea, this understanding that God exists, and somehow even the thought that I had that God cares about me and who God is significant in my life and makes a huge difference in my feeling of security and worth as a little kid. But I can also tell you the day when I stopped believing in God. The experience that led me to stop believing in God. I was like 7 years old, and my sister came racing into the living room and up the stairs to her bedroom, and she was sobbing her heart out. And of course, I'm the big brother. I'm 7. She's like 5.5. And I'm thinking to myself, what has she done now? And my dad follows her into the living room, and he sits down on the couch beside me, and he says those words that every kid dreads hearing. Your mom and I are getting a divorce. And my sister and I probably don't need to say to you, we were devastated. Through that experience, I went from, isn't life wonderful? Isn't God good? To going, life sucks. And who needs God anyway? What God? And if He does exist, He can't be much of a God, because the reality is He's not big enough to keep my parents from getting a divorce. And that was a life changer for me. Already at 7 years old, that was only reinforced a couple of years later through the suicide of my dad's second wife. And these experiences, right? These experiences undermined my sense that I was enough for life, because all of a sudden, life became so insecure. You know, my vision of who God was, my belief in who God was, that completely shriveled up. Adults couldn't be trusted. I mean, good night. They couldn't even take care of their own lives, never mind mine. Well, that's a snapshot of my early life. But I want to ask the question this morning, what about you? How do you answer the question for God? How do you fill in the blank? What do you say? And what occurs to me, and this may actually be a game changer, could be potentially a game changer for some of you, is that our belief, as you can see, our belief in God is often influenced and shaped by the experiences of life. Our belief concerning God is often influenced and shaped by the experiences of life more than having anything to do with God. See, my belief in God didn't disappear. It wasn't erased because, all of a sudden I came across new information about God. I thought, what was I thinking? I'm such an idiot. How could I believe in God? I read the God Delusion, and Dawkins said this about God. And how could I possibly believe in God when someone like Dawkins says, it wasn't that there was new information that I came across, that I concluded, oh no, God doesn't exist. It was the pain of life, the difficulty of life, the uncertainty of life, the experiences of life that I attributed to God. Now, you may say, in your own experience, yeah, there was that divorce. There was that illness. There was that pain. There was that broken heart. There was that experience in my life. And that experience, was so painful that the only response that I could come up with is to prevent that pain from ever happening again, I am going to cut myself off from people. And whatever my ideas about who God is may be. And that's how it worked in my life. I concluded life sucks. People can't be trusted. And so my decision was, I'm going to invest my life in animals, because you kind of see more what you get. Not with cats, but with other animals, you see what you get. And at a very young age, I developed this dream that I was going to be a veterinarian. I was going to pursue, if you will, being enough through pursuing this dream of being a veterinarian that I hoped would prevent me from experiencing the kind of pain that I had experienced through relationships with people, through trusting people. But let me ask, let's look at this. Is it possible that there is an alternate, and I would add, even better response, an alternate and better response to the pain of life other than closing ourselves off from God and people? Is it possible that there is an alternate and better explanation for the pain of life than closing ourselves, cutting ourselves off from the pain of God and other people? Because I can tell you this morning that I pursued being a veterinarian into university with the thought that achieving this is going to give me the experience that I am enough. I don't want anything to do with people. All they do is cause you heartache and pain, and I'm done with them. God didn't come through for me, and so who needs God? But if I can only be a veterinarian. And what I want to say to you this morning is that while on one hand, that may be true, I maybe did prevent some of those painful experiences in life by going through life that way and cutting myself off from relationships with others. It became a very heavy life. You know what I'm talking about? Because when you and I say to ourselves, here's this crazy thing, right? We say to ourselves, I feel like I'm just not enough. And yet on the other hand, we're like, oh yeah, but I want to be enough. And we say to ourselves, well, this is the path that I'm going to take to be enough. Everything that comes between you and that path makes your dream crumble, undermines your life. So for me, in pursuing being a veterinarian, CBC students, other students, every class, every exam, every grade was this potential crisis that was coming between me and my dream. Because to be honest, having value, having worth, being enough was still very important to me. I just decided that I was going to achieve it. I was going to pursue it in this specific way by becoming a veterinarian. So let me ask the question again. Is it possible that there is an alternate response, a better response to the pain of life than closing ourselves off, cutting ourselves off from people and from God? Now look up here, because Jesus assures us, for God so loved the world. We have our experience, but Jesus assures us, for God so loved the world. Now, I know some of you are rushing ahead and you're going, hey, I got this. Like, let's move on. I know that already. I've memorized that verse. I've got this. But slow down a minute. Answer the question, for God what? See, for all those times that you feel that you're not enough, you're not enough, and all that pain and all that hurt and all that difficulty that you attribute to God, Jesus gives us a radically different answer, leads us to a radically different conclusion than you and I seem to naturally come to. He assures us that when it comes to this world as a whole, but also the world as it relates to each one of us as individuals, that God so loves. To believe that all the pain, all the hurt, all the disappointment of life reveals that there is no God is inconsistent with what Jesus tells us is true about God. In fact, Jesus is saying that no matter what you experience, no matter what the pain is, no matter what the heartache is, no matter what the difficulty is, that in many respects, the one thing that you can hold on to, that you can know is true in the midst of however painful life gets, is that God so loved. And what Jesus goes on to say supports the trustworthiness of what he is saying. Because look up here again. He says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And we may admit that our belief in God is often influenced and shaped by the experiences of life. But contrary to our experiences, Jesus assures us, for God so loves. So let me come back to my first question. How do you know you're enough? How do you go through life knowing that who you are, who you uniquely are, what you bring truly is enough? Even how can you know, especially in those difficult moments of life, those excruciating, painful moments of life, those moments in life when you are filled with doubt, that you are enough? You know. You know, because Jesus assures us that we not only have a God who tells us that he loves us, but that he has demonstrated his love for us in the most sacrificial expression of love that this world has ever experienced. And the statement that Jesus is making to us as the world, but also to you as an individual, that Jesus was willing to turn over heaven and hell, that Jesus was willing to give up everything so that you could know in his eyes, the God of heaven and earth, that you are more than enough. It is the demonstration of Jesus' love for you that is the assurance that you are more than enough, because to the one who truly matters, the one who gave everything for you, he declares that you are enough. You think about this. You get rocked by the pain of life. You have that day like I did where your parents say, hey, we're getting a divorce. You're like, what? That's not in the family manual. Like, come on. Somebody that you trusted turns around and walks out the door on you, slams the door in your face, and they're gone. You get that referral to an oncologist. It's like, you get your midterms back. And up in the corner in thick red marker is this F. Won't happen to any of you, but you know. And what happens? You're devastated. Huh? Honestly. You're devastated. Here was your hope. But in the midst of that demonstration, you hold on to what? You turn to what? That the God who made heaven and earth, who not only is your creator, who uniquely made you, demonstrated the extent, the fullness of His love in the greatest expression of sacrificial love that this world has ever experienced before, so that you could know how deeply He loves you, how valuable you are to Him, so that you can know that whatever life brings your way, whatever rocks your world, that you are enough because you were enough to Jesus. Now, can you imagine this morning how knowing that, how believing that, how experiencing life, having life informed, even the experiences of life by that understanding, radically changes life, can change your life? That who you are, you plus learning plus growing plus developing equals enough. And I can tell you that it was literally these very words of Jesus that transformed the trajectory of my life. Because between my second and third year of university, from my background of like, God, what's God? I don't want anything to do with God. Someone challenged me. And they said, Adam, you're a science student. You say all these negative and cynical things about Jesus. I'm like, yeah. And they were like, well, have you ever looked into Jesus for yourself? You're a science student. It's like, I know I'm a science student. But they're like, yeah, but you should investigate stuff for yourself. I'm like, oh, okay. And, honestly, I was a little ashamed. And so I started out. They said, well, read these letters. And okay, I'll read these letters. And they're like the New Testament, it's called. And there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, like these guys who observed the life of Jesus, the words of Jesus, and they wrote down in detail their observations, really biographies about Jesus. And I started reading these letters. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, Jesus isn't anything like what I assumed Jesus to be. He isn't anything like the picture that I had developed in my mind that was influenced from so many different sources, but not from actually looking at Jesus for Himself. And I quickly could come to no other conclusion that Jesus is like no one else or nothing else that I have ever come across before. That Jesus is in an orbit all of His own. That Jesus, therefore, must be exactly who He claims to be. And in the middle of reading through these letters, one night I was driving, turned on the radio, and some guy was literally speaking on John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have eternal life. And I listened to him and I went, that is the truest truth that I have ever heard. And I said to Jesus, Jesus, I believes in you. I believes in you like I believes in nothing else. And this absolutely remarkable thing happened. Because I got up the next day after saying, Jesus, I believe in you. And it was like I was all of a sudden in an entirely new world. That there was this weight that just wasn't there anymore, that I didn't even know I had. It was just like the weight of life was gone. I went for a run, and it was like this was a brand new world. Like the sun had never shone brighter. The sky had never been bluer. It was like everything was brand new. And so, as you and I wrestle, let's be honest, as we wrestle with the question, am I enough? We keep on wrestling with the question, am I enough? Can I ask you this morning, have you believed? Do you believe as Jesus invites us to do? Because that's what Jesus invites us to do. He says, believe, and have you believed? You can do that this morning. When Jesus talks about believe, He's talking about trust. He's talking about faith. You can make a decision this morning to say, okay, Jesus, I maybe don't understand everything, but I'm choosing to believe in You. And I would love to pray with you in a minute or so. Maybe this morning you're saying, kind of like I said when I was confronted by my friend, I don't have enough information yet. And so let me encourage you. Look for those letters in what we call the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Maybe just start with John. You can find the Bible online and read John. And as you read John, if you've never read about Jesus firsthand before, I believe that the reality of Jesus is going to rock your world. Talk to people who know Jesus. They're all around you this morning. Maybe somebody invited you here and invite them out for coffee and say, can I ask? I got questions. Can I talk to you? I'd love to talk with you. John would love to talk with you. People around you, your friends, would love to talk to you and listen to your questions that you have. Doesn't what Jesus tell us challenge the view that is shaped by our experiences in life? The view of God that is shaped by our experiences in life. Jesus is telling us that who He is, that what He has done is a life and eternity changer when it comes to our understanding and experience of God, because the life, death, and resurrection assures us that God loves, especially through the painful, difficult experiences of life. And so, based on what Jesus has said to us, how are you going to answer the question? How are you going to respond to the question, am I enough? And I'd like to give you something that can kind of reinforce what Jesus is saying to us, that you can take with you wherever you go, whatever you're doing, whenever you feel like, I don't know if I'm enough. Would you do this with me, whoever you are? Would you just take your hands, your arms? We just hold them out in front of you. It's okay. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands in the air. It's just in front of you, okay? It's safe. Just put your hands in front of you and close your fists. Clench your fists even. And let that be a picture to you. Let that represent to you actually the weight of life. All those times that you might feel like, I don't feel like I'm enough. Now take your arms in front of you and just turn them over and open up your hands. And allow that posture to continue to remind you that you have a God who, in both telling you and demonstrating for you the enormity of the greatest expression of love that this world has ever seen, there is the statement, the reality, the truth, the experience that because of Jesus and His love, you are more than enough. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I'm so grateful for all the different things that try and inform our lives. All of the different ways that our feelings and experiences make us feel. That in the middle of all of that chaos at times, you declare through your words and actions, you are enough. You're enough to me, the Creator of heaven and earth. And this morning I thank you that we can, any one of us, can just say, Jesus, I believe in you. I believe that your life and your death and your resurrection validate and prove that who you are and what you said and what you did is true. And so this morning, Jesus, I consciously say, I believe in you. And for all of us, Father, I pray that the declaration of your love, the demonstration of your love for us, will continue to empower and transform our lives, of knowing that because of you, we truly are enough.